We find out that Harvard University students have collectively gotten together and demanded that Ted Cruz and other prominent Republicans have their degrees revoked because they're Republicans. They're going to have their degrees revoked. If that's not a perfect example, by the way, of rewriting history, in other words, you not only, in the case of Ted Cruz, did you earn this degree, but you earned it in exemplary fashion, but we're going to undo that. That seems to be very popular these days, undoing things that have actually happened, but that's not really my point today. My point is they're demanding it, and they're demanding a lot of other things too. And if they see something and hear something they don't like, they demand that it be taken away, as we saw with the Mandalorian issue recently, which has backfired spectacularly. You know what this really feels like? It feels like a classic episode of The Twilight Zone called It's a Good Life, where Billy Mooney, who would go on to be Will Robinson in Lost in Space, plays a 4-year-old kid who has total psychokinetic powers. He is, in fact, a god. He can do anything he wants to. Anything he thinks about happens. And the episode is so bone-chilling. It's about the most frightened I've ever been in The Twilight Zone. Just genuinely make your skin crawl. Because the episode deals with the fact that there's only a small handful of people left. At one point or another, somebody has said something to this little kid, either consciously or just in an offhand way, and he's blinked them into the cornfield. He makes them disappear. They become human pieces of corn out in the field. One guy offends him enough to turn him into a jack-in-the-box. And that whole episode is about living in a state of fear. Here is a god, but unlike God, this is not a creature of wisdom and infinite love. This is a kid who is offended at everything and has had ultimate power his entire life. And so something upsets him, gone. Children cannot govern themselves. Comes a point when these children grow up, at least they age, and then the question becomes, okay, what are they going to do when the people that have been doing things for them are no longer around to do things for them, either because they've died of natural causes or because they've been blinked into the cornfield? Well, this is the question, isn't it? So really, in order to get to the answer, I think, or at least to understand the problem, we have to kind of go back to the source. And I'm very indebted to a tremendous article in Reason magazine called The Fragile Generation. It talks quite a lot about what got us into this mess in terms of helicopter parents and so on. But I'd like to read just a few examples, real-world examples, of things that have happened in our society that give you an idea of where we're going with this generation of delicate monsters that we've raised. One day last year, a citizen on a prairie path in the Chicago suburb of Elmhurst came upon a teen boy chopping wood. Not a body, just some already fallen branches. Nonetheless, the onlooker called the cops. Officers interrogated the boy, who said he was trying to build a fort for himself and his friends. A local news site reports that the police then, quote, took the tools for safekeeping to be returned to the boy's parents, unquote. Here's another paragraph from the article. Your child's old enough to stay at home briefly and often does, but is it okay to leave her and her playmate home while you dash to the dry cleaner? Absolutely not, the magazine averred. Take the kids with you or save your errand for another time. After all, quote, you want to make sure that no one's feelings get too hurt if there's a squabble, unquote. And, you know, that's one of the great dangers that we have to face, that if we leave our children alone, they may argue with each other. And who would be there to stop them? It gets worse. You may remember the story of the Mitivs in Maryland, investigated twice for letting their kids, 10 and 6, walk home together from the park. Or the Deborah Harrell case in South Carolina, where a mom was thrown in jail for allowing her 9-year-old to play at the sprinkler playground while she worked at McDonald's. Or the 8-year-old Ohio boy who was supposed to get on a bus to Sunday school but snuck off to the Family Dollar store instead. His dad was arrested for child endangerment. And I suppose this one takes the cake. The Boulder Public Library in Colorado recently forbade anyone under 12 to enter without an adult because, quote, children may encounter hazards such as stairs, elevators, doors, furniture, electrical equipment, or other library patrons. Ah, yes, kids and library furniture, always a lethal combo. And we can continue to list stories like that until it gets dark outside and our parents tell us to come home for dinner. What is actually going on is pretty clear. And there's a number of things in this mix. A lot of people talk about the whole idea of being a trophy winner for just participating in a sport, and that's a lot of it. But really, what it really comes down to is instilling in these children a sense of overwhelming fear that children generally don't have. Children are kind of wired to go out and explore and play, and they're not allowed to do that anymore. The article points out something that I hadn't considered at all, and that is simply this. The news media, thanks again, during the 1980s really made a huge deal about child abductions. A huge deal. The article points out that in a recent year there were 9 children murdered by strangers, while 1,600 and something of them died in traffic accidents. But because the media focus tends to exclude all other forms of perspective, during the 80s and 90s, parents became utterly certain that if you leave your kid alone to walk to school by himself, he's simply going to be taken away and going to find him in a ditch, if you find him at all. And that's a legitimate concern, and it was overhyped by the media, as with everything else. And so that's a reasonable explanation for it. But the fact of it is that the parents who raise this current generation raise them in a state of perpetual fear. Childhood is a time to play, and play allows us to do a number of things. It allows us to go out and experience life on our own. It allows us to be comfortable with the idea of not having adult supervision all the time. It allowed us to bond closely together with friends because we were out on this shared adventure and there was no one else to supervise us. It allowed us, most importantly, to fail. And not just fail at things like games and learn how to lose at age 7, 8, or 9 when your little league team loses. That's a lesson. And it's a more important lesson than winning. But nevertheless, we learned it, and today's kids aren't allowed to lose. That would hurt their feelings. Well, hurt my feelings when we lost too. Made me a better ball player, and it also taught me how to deal with hurt feelings. The ability of play is the ability of a child to become an adult by testing behaviors in a context that's not going to be fatal to them. The kind of behaviors that they're going to have to know later on. And a great example, simple example of this is what happens on a baseball game when there is no umpire or adult or referee there. And there's a dispute about something. That ball hit the ground. No, it didn't. Yes, it did. No, it didn't. Yes, it did. And so, how do we solve this problem? Well, we could do the choke the bat thing, where whoever person's last one to get their hands on the bat before they get to the end of it, they win. And children believe that is a just outcome because they can say, well, while I may have disputed the call on the field, there's no disputing this. We both agreed to the terms going into it. We lost. Fair enough. It hit the ground. Another thing that commonly happens when you leave kids alone to deal with these kind of things is if you have this kind of argument, this happened, no, you didn't. If it cannot be resolved, most of the time, the kids will negotiate a perfectly reasonable solution. And the solution is called do-over. Okay? Do it over. We can't agree on it. Do over. And then, when we do it over, we get a result that both sides can be familiar with and comfortable with. So we end up with things like Harvard University students demanding that Harvard University revoke the degrees of people that they don't like. Anything they see that offends them, and everything offends them. And why wouldn't it? If you've grown up to believe that anytime anybody says anything offensive to you, that is a direct assault on you, that you've never learned in childhood how to deal with names and teasing and bullying and taunting, if no one ever told you sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me, if you never got that actually in the head, then as time goes on, you grow more and more outraged, more and more sensitive, more and more desperate, more and more fragile, more and more delicate, and you become a monster because everything offends you. It's all you can do. It's all you know how to do. You are an offense-generating machine. And that's not the fault of the kids. That's the fault of the adults. When you make a demand, usually, if you're going to make a demand, you better be negotiating from some kind of position of strength. If I demand $1 million, going to depend on the circumstances, isn't it? I could walk into a bank and say, I demand $1 million. Are you robbing the bank? No, I just demand it. You'll be escorted out the door. On the other hand, I'm standing on a flight deck of a jetliner and I've got something that looks like a bomb strapped to me and I say, I demand $1 million. I'm going to get a lot more attention because I'm holding some cards. My reaction to all this is when students demand that Ted Cruz be stripped of his degrees, my general reaction is to say, or what? If we don't do it, what's the consequences? You demand it. What if I say no? What if I say no? They don't know how to answer that. And the reason they don't know how to answer that is because they've never encountered that situation before. They've never encountered anybody saying no to them, ever. If they demand something, it happens. And what appears to be the most ironic part of this is that the teachers who created this entitlement attitude that had been basically fertilized, bred, and nurtured in the kids by their parents are the first ones to feel the results of this generation of delicate monsters that they themselves have created. It's the teachers who are the most afraid of these students, these social justice warriors. They're the ones that have to deal with them on a daily basis. I can happily ignore them because I never encounter them. And if I do encounter them, then I happily ignore them to their face. You know why? Well, because they're going to call me a racist and a misogynist and a homophobe and Islamophobe and all the rest. And I look at them and I think to myself, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. So when you're used to making demands, and when your demands are always met, then you're going to make more demands, aren't you? The real pandemic that's hitting America today in 2021 is a pandemic of malaise among young people, a sense of sadness, disappointment, lack of fulfillment, no joy, and no fun, as the Reason article points out. For example, in Waynesboro, Georgia, trick-or-treaters must be 12 or younger. They must be in a costume, and they must be accompanied by an adult at least 21 years of age. So if you have kids who are 15, 10, and 8, you can't send them out together. The 15-year-old is not allowed to dress up, yet she won't be considered old enough to supervise her siblings for another 6 years. And this is the one night of the entire year we traditionally let children pretend to be adults. And speaking of Halloween, here's the point where I want to take an actual wooden stake and drive it into my actual heart. Other schools and community centers now send letters home asking parents not to let their children wear scary costumes. Some even organize trunk-or-treats, cars parked in a circle, trunks open and filled with candy, thus saving the kids from having to walk around the neighborhood or knock on doors. That would be tiring and terrifying. If this is childhood, is it any wonder college kids also expect to be micromanaged on Halloween? Think about how miserable these kids are. Just think about how miserable they are. They've never been allowed to have fun, ever. They can't go and do something original. If they want to have a really wacky idea for Halloween, any joy that they might have had in it, whatever the costume is immediately mitigated by a very deep introspection about whose feelings this might hurt and what kind of trouble I might get in. And this is creating a joyless generation of terrified, delicate monsters who are monsters only because no one has ever allowed them. Forget about never even parenting them. That's an entirely different thing. They've never allowed them to be kids. They've never allowed them to go out on their own and play. They've never, ever, ever been unsupervised. What's going to happen to this generation? I'm generalizing, of course. When the boomers do what they want them to do and die off, who's going to do all of these things? Who's going to take care of these things? Nobody knows. What's going to happen when an entire generation of gender studies adults needs things to work and to fix? I don't know. But even that is insignificant compared to what's going to happen to this generation when there are no longer adults for them to complain to and have their needs met on demand, because there are no adults anymore. They're the adults now. And what kind of parents are they going to be if they become parents at all? What kind of parents are they going to be? If your entire life has been so regimented that all you're allowed to do is protest something or find some new outrage. How miserable is that? What a miserable, miserable, tragic childhood that is. It's child abuse is what it is, honestly. You are not allowed to have fun. You're not allowed to come up with interesting or fun ideas. You're not allowed to go out and explore on your own. You're not allowed to climb trees or ride on swings or anything else that is potentially fatal. You're not allowed to be unsupervised. We must know where you are at all times. No wonder this entire generation just immerses itself in the internet, where at least now they can be left alone. When I say left alone, their parents know that the body is physically safe in the basement or the bedroom, and they're out there online in a world of sexual predators. You see how it works? We don't want our kids to walk to school, not only because we're worried about them, but if we allow our kids to walk to school, we might get arrested by Child Protective Services. But we don't want our child to risk encountering being picked up by a serial sexual predator, which apparently doesn't happen very often. Instead, we'll keep them at home nice and safe, and they can play on the computer, where this kind of thing is commonplace. And now we're at the point, and have been for quite a while, where play, which is designed to release stress in children, is in fact the most stressful part of their lives. Used to be, if you went out to school and you met somebody you like, and he's drawing a picture of an airplane and you're drawing a picture of an airplane, hey, you both like airplanes. We'll be friends. Hang out together, might be friends for your entire life. I have friends that I played Little League Baseball with 50 years ago. But now, that's not how it works. Now, your friends are going to be determined by who your parents are friends with. I have a son, having a nice Chardonnay at a cocktail party somewhere, talking politics, Well, my son, Justinian, is 9, going to turn 9. He's gifted. He's in the gifted program. Really? Oh, well, that's tremendous. I have a boy, Erasmus, who is also 9, who's in the advanced gifted program. Sounds like they might get along just great. Why don't we set up a play date? Great. That's a great idea. I'm sure they'll love each other. Let's see. How's Tuesday at 5:30? No, he's got piano lessons at 5:30 on Tuesday. Can you do the following Monday at maybe 6 or so? Generally yes, but I'm just a little concerned that his studying's a little down. Okay, look here. How about if we go with Saturday at 2:00 from 2 to 4? Does that work for you? Yeah, 2 to 4 works for me. That's great. Okay, so do you want to pick him up and take him to your place, or you want me to pick him up? Well, I can pick him up this time. Okay, and then you can pick him up when you come back? Yeah, fantastic. How far away is his house? Block and a half. Don't prepare the path for your child. Prepare your child for the path. That's it. So, what do we do? I'm looking out there in the world, and I'll tell you what it looks like to me. It looks to me like right now in society, things are happening so fast. They're happening faster and faster and faster. To me, it's a conservation of momentum. What I really mean by that is there's enough young people with enough angst and enough worries and enough things to keep this whole world spinning around. But as you pull these things in tighter, you start to spin faster, the same way an ice skater does. And as you pull it in tighter and tighter and tighter, you spin faster and faster and faster. One of the experiences that kids today don't have is the experience that most of us our age did have, which was the enormously fun experience of having one of those just mechanical merry-go-round things in a playground. Just a circular board with a couple of iron handles and an axis, and you'd get off it, and you'd run, and you'd spin and spin and spin, get it going as fast as you could. And then when everybody pulled themselves toward the center, momentum would be conserved, and that thing would spin so fast that it would really scare you. And when you were finished being scared, you would just laugh and laugh and laugh and get on there and see if you could make it go faster. But that's what it feels like. It feels like this whole thing is spinning, spinning, spinning faster and faster and faster, and it simply cannot continue like this, and everybody knows it. So if it were up to me to solve this problem, I would go with something pretty simple. I wouldn't talk about any of this stuff. Certainly wouldn't lecture them. I'm lecturing you. I'm lecturing myself because we allowed this to happen. But if it were up to me, what I would do is I would show this generation what it's like to be free and happy. And I don't mean free in the constitutional sense. I mean, I'd just show them. I'd show them pictures. I'd show them video of modern kids, healthy kids today, walking through the woods, falling out of trees and building tree houses and forts and all that other stuff. And I would show them. And then I would also show them that it's okay to lose. And I would show them it's okay if somebody says something about you don't like. What I would do with this generation of grown children is I would show them how badly they have been deprived by the ideologues that were in charge of raising them. And I would let them see this, and I would think of some way, which has not completely occurred to me yet, to allow as many of them as possible to go back and relive aspects of their childhood. Actually, you know what? Not to go back and relive aspects of their childhood, to go back and live aspects of their childhood that they never had a chance to. I think it would be great. And I think we're going to see things get much worse before we see things get better. All we can really do about this in the long term, in the larger term, is simply this. Don't let your kids grow up this way. Chances are pretty good if you're watching this, you're not one of those people. But make the case. And remember, if you raise kids the way that kids are supposed to be raised, if you're one of those iconoclastic child murdering sympathizers who allows your kid to walk home from school or sends them out after school and says, don't come back until it gets dark, and when it gets dark, come back. If you're one of those people, you're not only raising good kids yourself who are going to turn into good adults, you're also setting an example for all of these other poor, deprived, grown-up children who have had all of the pleasure of life just leached away from them by paranoid, neurotic, bat guano crazy professors and parents and theories and all the rest that has crippled them emotionally and has created problems for us as a society that are going to fix themselves one way or another.